Today, we will be discussing on the topic yeast, and under this, we'll cover the yeast cell structure and its function, its habitat, nutrition, reproduction, and its economic importance. So, this yeast, belonging to the kingdom fungi, is a unicellular fungus, and their cells may remain attached in short chains, forming a pseudomycelium. So structurally, they are extremely variable in shape, that is globose, oval, elongated or rectangular. The cells are minute. These yeast cells are minute and range from 2 to 8 microns in diameter and 3 to 15 microns in length. So these yeast cells are larger than that of the bacteria, and they have no flagella, that is non-motile, but do possess most of the organelles that are present in other eukaryotic cells. The cells are very polymorphic and are capable of assuming different forms depending on the medium in which they grow and their age. So now we'll come to the yeast cell, its structure and function. So Antony van Leeuwenhoek was the first person to describe this yeast cell. As mentioned above, its thallus or its vegetative body is unicellular and non-mycelial. This yeast cell wall is a double layer, thin, delicate, and it's very flexible, and it is made up of 30 to 60% polysaccharides, that is beta glucan and the mannan sugar polymers, 15 to 30% proteins, then 5 to 20% lipids, and a very small amount of chitin, which constitute about approximately 2%. And in yeast, this cellulose is absent. And most of these proteins is linked to the mannan oligosaccharide, and it is termed as mannoprotein complex. And the function of the cell wall is to give shape and to provide structural support to the cell, that is the yeast cell. And then further, below the cell wall is a cytoplasmic membrane, which we also call it as the plasma membrane. This membrane is made up of particles that are penetrated by fibrils, which corresponds to the glucan fibrils of the cell wall. In yeast, the nucleus is surrounded by a nuclear membrane and it has pores in it. Further, within the cytoplasm are the cell organelles, which includes the mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, and the ribosomes. There are also glycogen, proteins, oils, and the refractile volute granules. Refractile volute granules are nothing but these are the metaphosphate polymers. So now we'll come to the yeast habitat. So these yeasts are widespread in the natural environment. They lack chlorophyll and hence they are strictly chemoorganotrophic. That means they require fixed organic forms of carbon to grow. Since yeasts are non-motile, that is they cannot move, so they rely on aerosols, animal vector, and the human activity for their natural dispersal. Commonly, these yeasts are also found in plants, that is plant tissue, but a few species of these yeasts are also found in commensals or parasitic relationship with animals. And some of these yeasts are also regarded as extremophiles, that is particularly osmophilic yeast, which are able to thrive, which are able to live in the solute-rich environment. So such yeast species are responsible for the spoilage of food. And in addition to natural habitat, they are also found in man-made environments. Say, for example, Saccharomyces cerevisiae are the only yeast species that colonizes the surfaces in wineries. And also these yeasts, they ferment carbohydrate, and it is because of this property they are used in baking and brewing industry. And hence they are called baker's yeast or the brewer's yeast. Alternatively, in hospitals, several opportunistic pathogenic yeast are also found. For this, example is the Candida albicans. These are the type of the yeast which is responsible for 8% of all the nosocomial infection. So here nosocomial infection is hospital-derived infection. So now we'll come to the yeast nutrition. Yeast is heterotrophic and saprophytic in nature. Their protoplasm secretes two types of enzyme, which includes the invertase and another one is the zymase. So now we'll see the invertase first. These enzymes, that is the invertase, they hydrolyzes this cane sugar to dextrose and it gets diffused into the cytoplasm through the semi-permeable membrane and they use it as food. And next is the zymase. These enzyme zymase convert the rest of the sugar into carbon dioxide and alcohol by a process which is known as fermentation. Further, the energy released from this fermentation is used up by the cell in various processes that takes place inside or within the cell. So now we'll come to yeast reproduction. Yeast reproduce by vegetative, asexual and the sexual method of reproduction. First one, we'll see the vegetative reproduction. Vegetative reproduction takes place by two methods. The first one is the budding and the second one is by fission. First we'll see this budding. So we'll assume this as the yeast cell. The first one is the outer covering, which is made up of the beta glucan, and the second layer, this is made up of chitin. We have this yeast nucleus here. This is the nucleus. And we have these vacuoles. And these are the inner content of the cytoplasm. So when the yeast mature, they undergo this budding process by pushing the protoplasm outwards in this way. Further, before this nucleus divides and it enters into the daughter cell, the mitochondria has already passed into the daughter cells and some of the cytoplasmic content. This is the vacuole. Then later on, this particular nucleus again elongates. Further elongates. This is the vacuole. Certain cytoplasmic content are there. And next, this will result in the transfer of the nucleus into the daughter cell. This is the vacuole. These are the cytoplasmic content. And further, the primary septum will be formed. Primary septum is made up of chitin. So this is the primary septum. primary septum, which is made up of chitin, and finally this particular secondary septum will also formed, and this secondary septum, this is made up of your beta glucans, and finally these two cells get separated. That means the daughter cell gets separated from the parental cell, and two yeast cells are formed. This is the nucleus, and the cycle continues. But sometimes the bud remains attached to the mother cell, and it may produce further additional buds. These processes repeated several times and results in the formation of a branched or unbranched chains of cell, which gives the appearance of the short hypha, which we termed it as pseudomycelium. The next is the fission method of reproduction. Yeasts are also called the fission yeast because they reproduce by fission. The cells undergo fission by transverse division, and in this method the parent cell elongates, the nucleus divides, and a transverse wall, which is also called a septum, develops centripetally. Centripetally means from the periphery towards the center, and thus separating the two daughter uninucleate cells. Finally, the transverse wall thickens and then it splits into two layers for each daughter cell before they separate. Next, we'll come to the asexual method of reproduction. Under asexual reproduction will take place under unfavorable condition. Under unfavorable condition. So during this nucleus of the cell, nucleus of the yeast cell, this is the nucleus of the yeast cell. These are the cell wall. Say for example, we say this as a cell wall. This is the nucleus. So this nucleus, it gets divided. These are the cytoplasmic content which are present here in the cytoplasm. And in this case, this nucleus, it gets mitotically divide or form 4 nuclei. Four nuclei are formed. Further, the cytoplasmic content that are present here, it gets condensed toward it passes near to the nucleus which has already been divided. And further, the wall of the cell also thickens. This is your nucleus. This is the cytoplasmic content. This is the wall, thickened wall I should say, thickened cell wall, and these are the 4 daughter cells which are formed here. 4 daughter cells are formed. And then when this condition, this is under unfavorable condition, and when the conditions become favorable, and when the condition becomes favorable, this whole structure, which we call it as an endospore, here, endospore will get converted into the vegetative cells. Vegetative cells, we also call it as the somatic cells. Somatic cells, that is under unfavorable condition. Now we'll come to the sexual reproduction. Yeast cells also reproduce sexually under unfavorable condition. In this type of reproduction, that is in sexual reproduction, the reproductive organs, that is the antheridia and the oogonia, are absent. Yeast may be homothallic or heterothallic. Homothallic means having both male and female reproductive structure on the same thallus. And by heterothallic, it means it requires two compatible partners to produce the sexual spores. And the sexual union takes place either between two somatic cells or between two ascospores, which assume the function of copulating gametangia. So there are three sexual processes, that is plasmogamy. Plasmogamy means the union of the cytoplasmic material. Next is the karyogamy. By karyogamy, it means the union of nuclear material. And finally, meiosis. It takes place either between the two somatic cells or between two gametangia, and it produces a zygote. So this zygotic cell, it acts as an ascus and produce 4 to 8 ascospores. So now we'll come to the economic importance of yeast. So these yeast are of a major economic and the health significance to the human mankind. They render certain beneficial as well as harmful activities. So first we'll see this beneficial use. The first one is bread making. These yeast are used in the manufacture of bread, that is to leaven the dough. During this process of fermentation, the ethyl alcohol and the carbon dioxide are formed. The bread becomes spongy because of this reaction due to the pressure that is exerted by the accumulated carbon dioxide. And also the flavor and the quality of the bread, it depends on the different strains of the yeast use. Second beneficial use is the production of alcohol. Yeast is also involved in the manufacture of alcohol by a process that is known as alcoholic fermentation. Here, the breakdown of carbohydrate such as starch and sugar by the yeast to carbon dioxide and the ethyl alcohol in the absence of oxygen is termed as the alcoholic fermentation. Now we'll come to yeast in human nutrition. So yeast, beside being very important in fermentation of food and beverages, they also have shown numerous beneficial effects on the human health. Among these are the probiotics. Probiotics is nothing but these are the live bacteria or yeast that are good for health, especially the digestive system. So these probiotics effects are one of the well-known health benefits, which includes the prevention and the treatment of intestinal diseases and immunomodulatory effects. So when we take an example, Saccharomyces cerevisiae variety Bollardi, this helps to maintain the balance of the microflora that are present in the digestive tract of humans, and therefore these prevent from various stomach disorder. And in addition to this, beta glucans that are present in the cell wall of the yeast are known for their immune stimulating property, and hence they are also effective in protecting against infection and other diseases. Now we'll come to the importance of yeast as the source of vitamins and enzymes. These yeast cells are also having high content of certain vitamins that includes vitamin B complex, riboflavin and vitamin D. Next is industrial exploitation of yeast. Yeast exploitation in future is likely to make significant impact in relation to renewable energy supply, then environmental biotechnology, including biological control and healthcare issues such as the study of human genetic disorder and cancer. With regard to energy, this yeast metabolism is capable of providing fuel, ethanol, from the renewable carbohydrate fermentation. And in the field of medicine, great advances has been made in the production of human therapeutic proteins with genetically engineered yeast. So now we'll come to the harmful activities. Although these yeasts are often immense beneficial to human life, they also produce several detrimental effects to the human beings. Some people, they exhibit hypersensitive reaction to dietary yeast. For example, persons suffering from Crohn's disease display elevated antibody response to baking and brewing strains of Saccharomyces cerevisiae. In such cases, hypersensitivity to yeast antigens may be involved in the pathogenesis of an important intestinal disorder. So many yeasts are also opportunistic pathogen to human. The predisposing factors to yeast infection includes natural factor, the next is dietary factors, mechanical factors, and finally the viral factors. So this, yes, they are also responsible for various nosocomial infection. One of the example is the mycosis that is caused by the Candida albicans, known as candidiasis, are the most common opportunistic yeast infection. So now we'll come to the conclusion. From the above discussion, we can conclude that the unicellular fungus, which we call it as yeast, are quite diverse and exhibit great specialization for habitat. In addition, they are of a major economic and health significance to human mankind.